welcome everybody to another episode of We All Grieve. I'm Kay Rogers, your host, and I'm joined today by two very special guests of mine, Brandy Rassey. Hi, Brandy.
Hi, Kay.
And Angela Knowles. Hi, Angela.
Hello.
I will go to Angie going forward. It's easier for me to say and clearly remember since this is take two anyway. So welcome. I appreciate you guys coming on the podcast today. So Angie, I understand Brandy had talked to me when I was recording Brent, and she had said that she knew somebody that had went through, a parent's worst nightmare, which is losing a child. And she kind of shared with me a little bit of your story. So if you don't mind, if you want to just kind of take us back to the beginning and kind of walk us through that journey, the stage is yours.
Sure. So back in 2012, that whole year had been just a whole mess. I believe that July, we had lost my husband's grandma. August, we lost my grandpa. And then September, I went into early labor because I was so emotional and stressed out because I had been off bed rest. And I developed high blood pressure, which is preeclampsia in pregnancy.
Right.
And I had undiagnosed high blood pressure and migraines. So I went into early labor. It was kind of normal delivery, but I had some complications, which I thought I was going to maybe lose my life. I hemorrhaged really bad during delivery. It was up to the point where it was right before they were going to have to take me to surgery. So they were rushing my husband out and my son out, and I'm just laying there in the bed with my mother-in-law holding on to me like, okay, this is it. I'm going to leave them now. And thank goodness everything, went fine. Everything was great. And I developed another condition that is not life-threatening or anything. It's just something I don't want people to Google because it's not pretty.
Okay.
And my son actually had it the same way. They thought his spinal cord had not fused right. So we were at the doctor's every day for me and my checkups and my son's blood work every single day, and then going to the hospital at the children's hospital to get sonos, and everything was great. And then about a month afterwards, I had finally started going back to work. And one night at the end of my shift, I got the call from my husband saying, you need to come home, call 911, Ace is not breathing. And I'm just like, what? Oh, it can't be that bad. He's fine. He's okay. Just calm down. I know, we're new parents. And he just kept calling and screaming, like, call 911 now, call 911. So I took off running from work, flew home. And when I got home, there was an ambulance and a police officer running out my front door with my son, completely lifeless. And I pulled up to my front yard, just jumped out, tried to get in the ambulance. I guess it was that big of a deal that I made it into some kind of report because it was just like they were really trying to keep me out of there. And then I just remember all the police swarming my house and just calling my mom and calling his mom, and I don't know what's going on, and I'm scared, and I don't know what to do, and no one will tell me anything. And I said, I've got to get to the hospital. I've got to go. And when I said that, an officer walked by and is like, you're not going anywhere. And I just dropped. And of course, all my neighbors are out because it's like 11 o'clock at night or 10:30, whatever it was. I'm screaming. There's lights everywhere. They take my son off. And then finally everybody left. And an officer came and was like, I'm going to drive you to the hospital. You're in no condition to drive. It's going to be okay. And I remember thinking, a weird thought, this is the first time I've ever been in a car, a police officer's car. This is weird to me. And then driving, late at night, nobody's on the road, thinking, why are we going so slow? Why is this taking forever?
Yeah, why aren't we going like crazy with the lights going and let's get there?
Right.
My kid's there. I got to go.
Mm-hmm. And so they dropped us off in the front of the children's hospital, which I've been through a million times. And I remember jumping out of the car and just taking off and just left my husband and the police in my dust. I don't know how I got to the ER. I made it there. And I, told them what was going on, and they pulled me to that side room and everybody caught up. And then the chaplain met us, and I'm in nursing field, so I know right off the bat, great, this is really, something's wrong.
Yeah, that's never good when the chaplain's waiting for you. Yeah.
And so eventually they let us go and see him. So we get pulled back into the trauma room, the big circle of rooms. And I just remember thinking how little he was, because he's only 6 weeks old, on a full-size gurney with all of these doctors and nurses just crowded around him. There's not enough room for you guys. Somebody's got to go. just crying hysterically, and people in and out, and the police are there, and the paramedics, and just freaking out, and just not knowing what to do, and just standing there like, what can I do? Crying. And then out of all the chaos, all I hear is Angie. And I turn, and it was one of my friends from high school who was actually a nurse working on my son. And I'm just like, oh my God, oh my God. So, yeah.
So when you got home and you had all the police were there, the ambulance was there, all the chaos was going on, and you're wanting to leave and go to follow the ambulance to the hospital, and the police officer come by and said, hey, you can't leave. Did he give you any reason why not or anything? Or did he just say you can't leave?
He just told me, nope, you're not going. You can't leave. Just in passing. Because I was out by myself in my front yard.
Excuse me.
And he was just, the tone he took, it was just like, well, do you think I did something? Like, I've been at work. I just got here. Like, I want to know where my child is.
So it's like super aggressive almost, maybe? Or maybe not that, just kind of stern, like you
just
cannot leave. Just kind of
stern, just kind of, I just didn't understand, like, he knew what was going on and I didn't. And it was like, well, why aren't you telling me? Why won't you stop and talk to me? Because it was just, everybody was everywhere.
And so everybody leaves, right? And what's the time frame, you think? Maybe, 30 minutes, maybe 20 minutes?
About 20, 30 minutes.
And while you guys are waiting, the ambulance is already gone, I'm assuming, right? Yep. And the police are still there. I mean, were they interacting with you guys, or were they just...
No. I stayed outside. I didn't know what they were.
Okay. So you were still outside this whole time.
I was outside,
okay,
yeah.
I gotcha.
I was on the phone, and I just kept seeing police officers in and out of my house. Not like they were taking anything or doing anything like that. And I didn't understand, well, why are all these police officers at the house? Like, what is going on? And, yeah,
So they all pack up and leave, don't say nothing to you, and one comes up and says, hey, we'll go ahead and drive you to the hospital.
Yep.
Wow.
Mm-hmm. And it was just so much confusion the whole time. It was just like, just being in like, kind of like a plane crash.
Yeah.
It was just like, I don't know which end's up or down, and just, I didn't know what direction to take.
Well, yeah, because, I mean, your mind's on what's going on with my baby, right? Yeah. I mean, that's where your head is the whole time, and nobody's telling you anything. It doesn't sound like they're offering any words of wisdom, which there aren't no words of wisdom, but even some information is better than none in that case, right? Because you're outside and you're not even noticing, like, what are we doing here?
Right.
So you get there, you're in the room, which is, I remember that when I went through that with my kid, and it's just, I remember, and when you talked about the room, I remember walking in there, same thing, it's a circular room, this gurney, and there's people everywhere, and you're sitting there and you're just like, I don't even know what to do at this point,
Right.
So you're in there, you're talking to your friend. And did she say anything to you, or was she there just to try to comfort you? I know you said she was a nurse and was working there.
She came in and she said my name, and I just grabbed onto her, and we just held each other, and I was just crying. And I just remember her holding me up and just I'm assuming just trying to keep me back and out of the way of everybody, because, I'm just, don't ask me for permission, just do whatever you got to do.
Right.
And then they eventually took him out, and they were going to run him upstairs to the pediatric ICU to do some testing and figure out what's going on and everything like that. So we got pulled upstairs. He got settled in his room. And again, I was just like, why is he so little on this huge gurney? But it's a child's gurney, so their bed's up there. And then I just remember, like, again, all the doctors and everybody, and it's like, okay, we're just trying to get him stable. Let's go run some tests. And then we got pulled to the waiting room. And that's when I first met one of the detectives. And that's when the interrogation started.
Wow.
Hours upon hours for 4 days.
And all this was going on in the hospital?
All in the hospital.
And so when you first so you're up in the room, it's bringing back a lot of memories for me too. I remember how that looks, and they look so small, and your baby was 6 weeks old. My son was 11, so it was crazy how, but anyway, so you guys are up in the room, you got him in there, and I'm sure at that point you're still just trying to digest what the hell just happened. It's all, because it always happens so fast and everything is so quick. It's like you're almost like your mind doesn't get a chance to catch up with everything that just happened. And so then when you're doing this and you're going through that process, and that's when the detective comes in. And so what did he say to you initially when he wanted to talk to you?
Well, she just wanted to get
Sorry.
Yeah. Okay. Just a basic, how was your day, like the setup, timeline and everything, and what was going on, and, where were you, trying to figure out, okay, who's involved, what happened, kind of a thing. And it was just starting off as just basic questions. And then we were pulled in individually at this time. So I'm like, okay, just not even thinking like, let's just go and talk. Cause I didn't know, you don't have to talk to him. But as a parent and not, being guilty of anything, it's like, I'm going in and talking to you. I want to find out what's going on. And just going in there. And then the questions just started getting more just odder and just more direct and just, okay, something's not right.
Do you remember can you maybe share an example of what one of those would have been, or what that, like, what kind of really started making you think, okay, this is going in a direction I didn't expect?
She started asking questions like, just asking about my husband, like, has he ever hit you? Do you feel safe at home? And, has he ever been aggressive towards you or around you? And I'm just like, no, he's like the biggest teddy bear I've ever met.
Did they tell you what was going on with
No,
Asa at this
no.
point? So you knew nothing, like...
I knew absolutely nothing.
No reason to why he stopped breathing?
Nope,
Nothing.
They had no idea what was going on. It was just, he came in, I believe he stopped breathing and his heart was failing, but that they caught it right at the last second. So they could kind of revive him in a way.
Okay.
And then he was fine. And it's like, okay, let's just get him stable. And then we can do the scans to really focus on what's going on. So I didn't know any of that. It was just while we were waiting, this started happening. So
you can't even spend time trying to figure out what's going on and ask questions. You start getting pulled in the other room and all these interrogations start happening.
Mm-hmm. Back and forth. First, Zach and then me and then just nonstop, which felt nonstop for me. It felt like it was just 24/7 for 4 days.
And at that point, when those interviews started and you're trying to figure out what's going on with your baby,
mm-hmm.
do you feel like maybe the hospital staff was not telling you on purpose because of the interrogations that were going on? Or do you think they just, because you were pulled in so much, you just didn't have the opportunity to really engage with the hospital staff?
I think I just wasn't really engaged with them at that point yet.
Okay.
I mean, they never really steered me. I mean, they were my huge support. They never made me feel kind of awkward or anything like that. It was just like, okay, we're going to focus on your son. We're here for him first. And then it was just kind of like guiding me through this process. Because I knew, it's not their first rodeo. So,
no.
And it's just, I'm so grateful for them. They really helped me out and just making like, have you eaten anything yet? Like, you need to go to the snack room around the corner and, have you gotten you need to go home and take a shower. Like, you need to take care of you so you can take care of him. So. Yeah,
and that makes sense. I mean, you want people to, want to be able to take care of them because you're in your worst time, and
mm-hmm.
they recognize that pretty well.
Because I completely stopped eating. I vaguely remember catnapping out in the waiting room, and I think I Love Lucy was on. It was just like, I can't sleep. Like, I can't sleep. He's in another room, fighting for his life. How can I sleep? How can I rest? I gotta, go. And they're like, you need to calm down.
So in between the interrogations and in between talking with hospital staff, did you start kind of piecing together what they said was going on with your son?
Yes. So the doctors would kind of give us an update every morning, the heads of neuro or whatever, pediatric and stuff. And, being there throughout the night and just taking turns, because we're only allowed to have like 2 people in the room.
Right, yeah.
Just taking turns, and thank God for his mom, because she's a nurse. And so she was kind of helping me understand, the jargons and everything. So it's like, okay, so what did they say about this? And it was just so back and forth of he's so unstable. It was second by second. So 1 second it's, we're getting him stable, let's go for testing. And then it's, no, we can't go because his heart rate's rising or his breathing's dropping or, his temp's off. We went from box fans in the room and ice packs all over his body to covering him up with heated blankets and trying to warm him up. And mind you, the whole time they were like, you cannot talk to him. You can't touch him. Don't breathe on him, because they induced him into a coma because of his swelling in his brain.
Okay.
And they said any kind of stimulus would cause more damage to his brain unintentionally. Even if it's a sweet, I love you, that would get him to think and wake up.
Okay.
And would cause more swelling and more damage. They're like, don't just be there like a shadow, kind of.
God, that had to be
incredibly
difficult.
Mm-hmm.
Not even be able to say I love you or just touch him a little bit or just.
And that was the one time, I don't know what day it was, but my husband had went up to and whispered him like, keep on fighting, buddy. I love you. Very quiet whisper. And one of the employees there had kind of taken an attitude and was like, don't talk to him. And I was just kind of like in mama mode at that point. It's just like, you're here to do a job. If you can do a great job, then you can stay. But if you don't think you can do that and keep your emotions in check, there's the door.
Yeah, because at the end of the day, this is my son, not yours.
Right.
Right.
And I started getting because I was getting the feel like, okay, like, because my husband was finally arrested on day 3. And the police officer had come back and said they had arrested him for child abuse charges. And that, more would probably file later. And I was just like, okay, they're really focusing on this and stuff. And it's just like, all right, this isn't right. And I'm just, the whole time I'm siding with my husband, like, he can never do this. And, this isn't happening because he is the biggest teddy bear I've ever met. Like,
sure. Right.
He's super lovey-dovey and everything.
So, you're going through this process. You're trying to figure out what's going on with your son.
Mm-hmm.
You guys are getting pulled in and out of the room, going through hours of interrogation.
Mm-hmm.
And 3 days into this, after going through all that, finally they decide they're going to arrest your husband.
Mm-hmm.
And in the meantime, during this whole process, they're not even telling you what they're trying to figure out or anything going on.
Didn't they arrest him at the hospital?
At the hospital. We were in the room together, and she came in and said, well, we want to do some more talking, we just, more questions and stuff. It's like, okay, didn't think anything of it, because it was, at this point, it was just normal. It's just part of every day for us. And he never came back.
He didn't get to say bye.
Nothing.
And never once did they say, hey, this is an investigation. You have a right to counsel or anything like that.
No.
I guess at that point, that legally they don't have to. It's when they read you your rights.
They never had to. And I never knew that I could get an attorney first. Even, guilty or not, is aside from that. But it was just like, I'm just trying to talk to another person that's trying to figure out what I want to know everything.
Yeah, because, I think at that point I would have been starting to get a little suspicious. Like, okay, you're asking me some really weird questions, and I'm not sure this is a good thing for me and my family right now, going through what we're already going through.
Right. And after they had arrested him, that's when I finally stopped her, and I'm like, you know what? I'm done. And mind you, DCFS was showing up at this time and stuff, and I like, do you have any other kids? And it was just like, I'm done. Like, we'll talk later. I can get my attorney, and then we'll go from there. But I need to focus on my son, because I'm like a single mom with a sick, child at the hospital. It's like, I don't need this right now.
So, okay, so they arrested your husband, and so where were you at? I mean, I know you guys were in the hospital and you were in the room with your son. When they took him away, they
led him, from what I heard, out in cuffs. Through the lobby, through the children's room, the hallways and stuff, through there, handcuffed. And my entire family saw it. And it was just like, oh my God.
And there you are in the room by yourself, and you're like,
didn't even know what happened.
I don't even know what to do right now.
Yep.
So when did you find out they'd arrested him and walked him out?
The police officer came back and then told me, we had arrested your husband on these charges, and like, do you need anything? Do you have any questions? And it's just like, no, I'm done. I am so done.
Well, at that point, you're like, I've already answered all your questions, and this is where I'm at.
It started to feel like it was the same questions over and over again. And it was just like, what do you want me to say? I've already answered this question, because they were trying to figure out if we were telling a story or,
or collusion or whatever.
Right.
Okay.
Like, oh, I'm trying to protect him from something. And it's just like, no, I've answered this like 50 times. I'm done answering these questions. I felt like I was being taken away from my son.
Sure. Because that's where you wanted your focus to be, not on this other stuff over here.
But hindsight, I feel like if I didn't talk to them, that they would have never allowed me to be there. And mind you, I was at the hospital my work the entire time. So it was just like, I feel like they would have just, nope. And then I wouldn't have gotten the chance.
So you'd never had that time with your son while you're up there then either.
Right.
So where did you go from there? What?
Well, I stayed at the hospital because we were told, you can't sleep outside in, the waiting room stuff, even though we kind of catnapped. All the families up there do. We just kind of start taking care of one another. And then that next morning was day 4. And the heads came in and were like, look, we can't, he's not stable enough to do these scans, and we're trying the best that we can. But at this point, there doesn't really look like there's going to be a chance. because they had put in, a drain in his brain. That was his first haircut. I remember thinking, being so mad. It's like, I missed his first haircut. But it was to put a drain into his brain because he had swelling on his brain. He had bleeding on his retinas. And his heart was stopping. He stopped breathing. And it was basically his brainstem, the top of his brainstem, which controls your body's just natural breathing and heart rate and everything, had been damaged. And so they're just there's really no choice. You need to make a decision. Or they were going to make it for me.
So when you heard that news, what was your thought at that point?
I broke down. And they kind of gave me my space. I started crying.
That's okay. You're allowed. It's fine.
But I remember a nurse coming in and talking with me. And I don't remember ever seeing her. And I still she's my guardian angel. That's what I see her as. And she came in and she's like, there's only 2 people in this room right now that know when that time's going to be and those choices need to be made. And that's your son and that's God. And they are the only 2 that should tell you what it is. Not the head of a department, not, some doctor or police officer. It's them. And that's what you need to focus on. He'll tell you when he's ready. Because I'm just, nope, we're going to do everything we can. And, there's, still more testing and we can still do this and we can save them. And they're just, it was starting to become a realization no, this isn't going to end right.
Yeah, you can't come back.
Right.
Yeah.
And we had, I know I had talked to other families up there because there was a family that was kind of going through something similar that we were, except their child was older, but they had the same symptoms as my son. And from her story, it was her daughter, they were at a family get-together, and her daughter just dropped mid-softball game. Just dropped and collapsed. And she had the swelling and the bleeding, and they're like, this is child abuse. And so they investigated her and come to find out she had a condition. So it's just okay, well, there's a little bit of hope and, something's going on. And no, but it was nice to have her because, and even that last day I'd asked the nurses, can you please call her over here? Cause she's, becoming my family and meeting my son and going through that together. And it was just really, I was so grateful to have that support system there.
Oh, especially after just going through what you just went through. I'm sure you had to have something.
Right. And I mean, mind you, my whole family was up there. His family's up there. You guys were there. And it was just, everybody was up there.
So how soon after they walked him out, did they come to you with that point? You have to make a decision.
Well, I think it was the next morning that they did. Because I spent that whole night up there by myself. I mean, my family was up there, but I remember, all the lights and stuff were turned off and watching it on the news. And the nurses coming in and just I am so sorry. Because my husband, it was everywhere. It was on the news broadcasts, radio, all over Facebook.
Wow.
And it was just local Heights man arrested for child abuse. And it was just the nurses were coming in and checking on me. And it was just I am so sorry, honey. And my mom and my mother-in-law are don't watch it. And I'm I kind of felt like I had to. And
because at that point they're telling you don't do that. And then you're well, now I got to because
right.
It's I need to know what they're saying.
Right.
Yeah.
And so that next morning, they finally came in on that last day and was it was real early that morning. They're we just can't keep them steady. We can't keep them stable. And we need to start making some choices. And that's when we told them, let's keep them comfortable. Basically put them on hospice. Let's just keep them comfortable as long as we can. If something changes, great. If not, not a big deal. And then that's when we were approached, after I told them, I think we're ready. Because at that point, and in being nursing, you kind of get that feel of they're not there anymore. And he's just kind of, just relaxing. And mind you that he's in a coma and drugged up, so he wasn't in any pain. But I told him, I think I'm ready. And then that's when they approached me for the gift of hope. And it was the nurses. And it was just okay, let's start this process and we'll get going.
And when they approached you and talked to you about organ donation, what was your thought right off the bat when they kind of started bringing it to you?
I was, let's go. Because I'm an organ donor anyway. I'm registered. My whole family is. been in that world for a while because my aunt has been a kidney recipient.
Oh, okay.
And so we all, it's very important to us. And it was just, nope, let's go. What do I got to do? And, because at that point it's just like, he's not here anymore.
Yeah, I remember when my son was up there and we were kind of going through that, and it got to that point, that exact same. It's like, he's not here.
Right.
This isn't him. This is that's his physical body.
Right.
His spirit he's already gone. Mm-hmm. And when we talked about organ donation, we were all just like, yeah, it makes sense. We'll just do it. Mm-hmm. And it wasn't even really a big discussion. We're like, yeah, we're going to do this.
Yeah, I wasn't really upset about it at first. I mean, it was just like, no, okay, let's go. It's, great. And I remember the coordinator came in and talked with me, pulled me aside, and my dad came over, and it's just weird because my dad's like this manly man. And so for him to help me fill out paperwork, it's like, no, that's Mom's job. Mom always helps me fill out paperwork. So, we went next door and he was walking us through it because, it's not just, okay, yeah, let's do it. And then it happens. It's a huge process.
Mm-hmm. A lot of paperwork.
And I love the fact because he never made me feel pressured and, oh, okay, we got to do this. And it's just, what do you feel comfortable with? And, what does your religion feel about this and stuff like that? And I remember, we got through everything, and then he'd asked my permission to go over and meet my son. And he's like, I always like to meet everyone and pray over them and thank them for their gift because they are giving their life for somebody else. And he's like, I always think about my kids when I come and do this. He goes, I don't know how I would handle this. Like, you're just so, I don't know, just so strong with it. And he went over there, and I remember watching him through the glass and just seeing him choke up and just tear up. And it's like, it's a stranger crying over my baby and praying over him. It's just like, wow.
Yeah, it's funny. So I'd done some advocacy work over at St. Francis at their jump center where they do their trainings and stuff. Mm-hmm. And they have this thing called the brain death simulation. And I went over and I spoke to the group of doctors and nurses and there's cardiologists, all these different people that go through this brain death simulation, talking through, because that's what happened with our son. He was brain dead for the most part. And then, we tried to do what we could, but it came down to the fact that, he was legally brain dead. He was gone. Mm-hmm. So I was talking through that. And I remember when he was in the hospital, this one nurse was in there, and he had a beard at the time, and a great guy, really super friendly, was very, they treated Nicholas with a ton of respect, talked to him like he was still a living patient, all these kinds of things, right? So I got done with my talk, and now this is fast forwarding 7 years when I'm doing this talk of this brain death simulation. And I get done with my part of it, and I'm leaving, and they were taking a break, and this guy comes up to me, he says, hey, I just want to let you know, I'm that guy. I said, wow, that's incredible. He goes, yeah. He goes, my first shift on that floor, first shift ever, was your son. And he goes, it's changed me forever. He goes, I approach nursing so different now. And, of course, we hugged, and it was fantastic to meet him. But to your point of, how some of them can become kind of like your family while you're up there.
Oh, yeah.
And the other part of it, it does impact them for life. I mean, he said, he goes, I approach nursing completely different now.
Right.
So it had it's a positive impact, of course, but so that, those stories are, and you just never, it's a small world, it seems like, and those things always stay with you.
And it was crazy because one of the many times I went out in the waiting room, and I don't know how I did it, but I ended up with my son's sock. And I remember, I don't know how, just all the chaos, I had his sock. So it was like my worry stone. And I was out there, and then the other family that had been through something, she saw me out there crying, and she came up to me crying. And mind you, I didn't know who she was at this time. And she pulls out her sock and starts waving it around and just like, oh, because we both, wanted. It's like, how in the world did we end up with a sock? But I had been out there again, and I was crying, and my son had just been baptized. We had an emergency baptism on Halloween for him. And being a Baptist, I felt really weird about it. It was like one of those weird, not inappropriate thoughts, but it was just like, why am I thinking about this right now?
Right.
But they had a seashell with holy water, and mind you, it was St. Francis, and they baptized him, poured it over his head, and I'm just the whole time like, how are we going to do a full immersion baptism? Like, he's got his ventilator on and everything, and I was just like, this is so weird for me, but I think God would be okay with this. Like, yeah, it's okay.
He'd be fine.
So I was out in the waiting room, and I was crying, and this young girl who's working the desk, she's really young, came over and, are you okay? Can I get you anything? And she saw my seashell, and she starts going on about her vacation with her family to Florida. And I'm just like, why are you talking about your vacation with your family? And she's, well, my family, every year, we always go out there and collect seashells for the baptisms. And my dad is the pastor, and he performs the baptism. I'm like, I think your dad just baptized my son.
Oh.
So it was just like hugging it out. It's like, oh, well, now you're part of my family. And it's just like, oh.
Isn't that crazy? Small world.
Yeah.
So you're doing the organ donation. You go through all the process, all the paperwork, everything. And I know they take a little bit of time to try to find the recipients.
Right.
And then they kind of tell you, like, I know for Nick it was like 24 hours, and they had finally found, I think 4 or 5 different recipients that they were going to transplant to. And they said, we're going to be doing the procure the organs, like I think it was Wednesday at 5:30. And they said, I know you probably want to be here when we take him, but, we would appreciate it if you didn't, because we found that as hard on as it is on you, it's hard on us too. And then if the family's in there, and it's very emotional, obviously. And did you have any kind of conversation like that?
Well, that morning we had that talk, and they're like, okay, let's get the process going. So that final day, they let me finally hold my son and talk to him. And it was just like, it's not going to, nothing's going to hurt him now. He's fine. And so we had the entire family coming in. Mind you, it was, waiting time for, the teens to get ready. And everybody came in. Everyone said their goodbyes. I'm crying, and, the whole room was completely packed with people. I don't know how they allowed that, but it was just like, thank you. But they finally came in that evening and was like, okay, we've got to get started. So they made a mold of his hand and mold of his foot. And they cut his hair again and again. I'm like, why are you cutting his hair? But it was for locks for us. And then everyone said their goodbye and, left. And they're like, okay, we're going to wheel him down. And I got to go with them. And so we were walking together, and I'm crying hysterically. And apparently I kept saying, I just want to go home. I want to go home. I want to go home, over and over and over again. And his mom's like, if you want me to do this for you, I can do this. And I said, no, I've got to be here. And somehow I got a teddy bear somewhere in there. Someone gave me, and I'm just holding on to that for dear life. And so they brought us downstairs to the surgical suite. And so we waited out in the waiting room for them to get him prepped, because they had explained to us what the process is going to be. And, after he's declared passed, we have to hook him back up to the ventilator to keep him oxygenated.
Right.
To keep the organs as healthy for as long as possible.
Right. Yep.
And so I'm like, okay, I'm okay with that, So they bring us back in, and I just remember it was a huge white surgical room, like huge, with a wooden rocking chair in the middle, and feeling so out of place. It's like, that's not supposed to be there. Like a scary movie, like, that's not, that's a weird
that's
thing.
Not normal.
Like, and they said, that is your chair. That's where you're going to sit. And so I sat there, and his mom was there with me. So it was kind of like, my husband was still there. Because at this point, he didn't know any of this was happening.
Okay.
They never told him anything. He found out that our son passed on the news with everybody else while he was sitting in jail.
Wow.
And so, they took him.
And at this point, you haven't been able to communicate yet with him
Nope,
either?
not at all.
Okay.
They said nope. So they started taking him off of his ventilator and the electrodes and everything, and it was just him. And he, right off the bat, started fighting. And was, it was really hard to watch, because at the beginning, I was just begging him not to go. And then at the end, I was just like, baby, you need to go. It's okay. You're going to see me cry, and I'm okay. But it was just like, you got to go, honey. It's time. And then he finally went, and they immediately took him, from me, and rushed him out for surgery. And then they took me out into the waiting room where I got to wait. One of my friends that I used to work with actually came down. I didn't even know she was coming. And she's like, I just want to be here with you. I just want to sit. We don't have to talk. I just want to sit with you. And that meant the world to me. And then I remember the coroner's office coming, because they have to come and ask like basic questions and stuff because of what happened. There's going to be an autopsy. And then I remember later, because, we had to spend all day. They had to fly in surgeons from Chicago and get transplant team and stuff. Everybody lined up. And they finally brought us back in there. And I remember sitting back down and them bringing him to me. And I'm like, wow, this is like him being born again. Because he was all wrapped up. And they said, don't unwrap him, because he'd just been through surgery. And I was just like, this feels so weird. Like, it's just like, there's my baby. And it was my mom and my dad and my husband's mom. And we all got to say our goodbyes and stuff. And I was choked up. But at this point, I was kind of shutting down. I was just getting really quiet.
Yeah, you'd been through some crazy, crazy trauma.
And I just remember the hardest one was my dad just holding him the same way he was holding him that day he was born. And just not crying. And just nothing. And it just hurt me because I'm like, I know my dad's hurting really bad. But he's like, no, I'm a guy and I don't show emotion. We don't talk about that kind of stuff. Just.
Boy, ain't that the truth.
Right. And then I remember I said, I'm okay. I'm done. I'm ready for him to take him. And the man from the coroner's office took him. And then he went to talk to the nurse about something. And then he stopped and turned back around and found me. And he said, I just want you to know that I'm going to take extra special care of him. And then he's never going to be alone. And just that little moment of just, not that he did anything to help, but that meant so much to me and helped me so much. Because I wasn't even thinking about that part of the,
Right.
And then it was just like, oh my God, like, thank you.
Just that little bit of reassurance kind of just gave you a little bit of.
Right.
Just a little bit of ease.
Yeah.
Just that he's going to be taken care of.
Right. And then I remember my mom, she took me to her house because they didn't want me to be by myself. And she had brought my dog Butter to the house. And I was like, why is he here?
Your dog's name is Butter?
His name was Butter. He's Eukanuba, but he's like a big fancy name. But Butter was there.
Awesome.
And I just remember, he's a golden retriever.
Okay.
So he's, buttery. He's got a lot of other nicknames, Country Croc and Butt. And Butt. But I just remember sleeping on my mom's couch and not getting any sleep because I was at that point so numb. But the whole night, Butter's trying to climb on me on the couch because he knows something's wrong. And then that next morning, I remember telling my mom I need to go home. I need to go home, And then I kind of got that feeling she was trying to stall and she was afraid if you go home, that's going to be it. Not that I was, suicidal or anything like that, but she was just afraid of losing her baby. And I just remember yelling at her, I've got to go home. If you don't take me, I'm going to start walking. And then she finally let me go. And then when I got home, I just remember sitting on the couch and staring at the TV shut off for hours. It just went by and I didn't even realize it. And so I was just numb.
Just trying to absorb everything that just happened. And how many,
Right.
So how much time, what's the time frame we're talking here? By the time when this all started, by the time you got home?
It was, October 30th at super late. So it was going into the Halloween.
Right.
To November 3rd. And so I finally went home that night, November 3rd.
Oh, wow. That's my birthday.
Yeah. And Halloween was actually my other grandpa's angel date. And it was my aunt's birthday and my cousin's birthday and Halloween. So it's just okay. But I remember the nurses bringing the kids around in wagons dressed up in Halloween outfits. And I'm like, well, what day is it? Because it kind of all started to blur together.
Yeah, it does.
Right.
So you were there for 4 days, it sounds like.
Mm-hmm.
Wow. That's
just
a
nonstop.
lot in 4 days. It's you never,
There was no break.
No, it was just rapid, constant craziness going on.
Yeah.
In the middle of trying to figure out, what in the world is going on with my kid, and then everything with your husband and all this crazy stuff. So you're at home, and I'm sure when you were sitting, you're just trying to process all of this information because I think you were probably just on sensory and mind overload, and you're just trying to filter through all this craziness. What was your next step? So you sat there for hours, just kind of just sitting there, but
Next step for us, it was just kind of, okay, deep breath. Now we've got to focus on the courts.
Okay.
So, it was all over the news. And that's kind of how I found out about the court dates and stuff. And he finally was allowed to call home. And so we started getting in that game frame of, okay, we've got to focus once, the hearings and everything. Because, of course, the charges got changed to first-degree murder.
He wasn't allowed to call you
because of
Asa was still alive and he wasn't allowed to know anything, right?
Right. I mean, he wasn't even allowed to have a obituary when we finalized that. And I would send him pictures so he would have something, and they sent him back saying, that's not allowed because, victim and and, you know, the person. And it was just like, I don't understand that. That's his son, you know.
And at this point, they really haven't told you anything, right?
Nothing.
Nobody's come and said, hey, this is what
Nope.
we're doing. This is what we've charged, and this is why.
Right. Nope.
So you're just blind into this.
I found out on the news with
Wow.
everybody else.
What a way to find out.
Yep.
Holy cow.
And it was everywhere. And mind you, the whole time, like on Facebook and everything, it was just people had an opinion about everything.
Yeah.
And I was just like...
a very uninformed opinion most of the time. You
Oh, it was
find
bad.
out on
It was so
everything.
bad.
Yeah. I remember like Brent was even speaking up and he's
Mhm.
like, it's just like yelling at the TV, you know, during a scary movie or something. And it's just like, he's not going to hear this and like, just stop. And his mom's like, you know, Angela is the only one that's going to be reading this. And it's just going to upset her. Like, just, you need to stop. And I got to the point where it's like, look, if you were there, please come and talk to me about what happened and what was going on so that I can find out. Because I'm like, all this talk and everything, it's not helping. It's not doing anything. It's not making me feel good or you feel good or anything like that. It's just like, but you know where my address is because it's all over the news. Because they brought, and then I, you know, my anxiety started kicking in for that.
So, yeah, and so that's a good point, too. So, I mean, your address, I mean, your whole life becomes visible to everybody.
Yes.
And so, did the news show up at your door, want to talk to you? Was there any,
they didn't show up at the house. They showed up at the courthouse and literally chased me down from a hearing. I can't remember which one it was, but there was always a reporter in there. And one time, a reporter followed me out for an interview. And I just kept my head held high and I power walked to that elevator and all I heard was my mom yelling and getting in her face saying, get away from her and don't ask her a God thing. And I'm just saying, like walking out just like, that's my mom. Like, yes, get her, mom. And so we all get in the elevator and there's this awkward silence and then we just all start cracking up and just like, and my mom's like, I don't care. That's my kid, and you ain't going to do that to her.
Well, no, I mean, that's not really, I mean,
it's
I get it.
It's inappropriate.
Yeah, you want to report it, but maybe try it in a different way.
And see, I started getting like, because my anxiety was going crazy. Because I was thinking, like, no, nobody made a threat or anything like that, but I just felt like somebody was going to come over to the house because, oh, well, he did this to a child, so he's going to do something to the house, you know? Like, somebody was going to come and do something.
So you felt kind of unsafe in your own home at that point.
I didn't feel safe to go to my mailbox. And it was just all my anxiety. Not like anybody was doing anything.
There was never any threats or anything like that?
Oh, no. And like I was afraid like the news was going to stop by or do a drive-by of the house or something like that.
Well, I was kind of thinking maybe they would try to do that too because, you know, with all this going on and they'd already been blowing it up and but maybe they at least have enough
and I felt bad.
Compassion not to do that, right?
Well, because I started feeling like they were trying to like get more viewers and more money from my experience. Like, you know what I mean? Just like you're profiting off of my, you know, horrible thing. And it's just like, that's sick to me. Like, no. And working in counseling and stuff, and I was talking to my counselor about it, and she's like, well, I've kind of been through something similar. And she's like, just no, it's just your mind going crazy. Just turn off the news. You don't have to watch that stuff. You don't have to listen. You don't have to be on Facebook, you know, and that's what I started my self-care and just really focuses. I've always been that person that's like, I got to take care of everybody else. I'm the mama bear. I got to help. I don't, you know, don't take care of myself. And then that's when that started.
So then you realize, okay, I got to start to go through this and be good to people. I've got to get myself right.
Right.
Yeah. Because if
I was a mess.
Yeah. Because if I'm a mess, then I'm not any good to anybody else.
Because I was never diagnosed, but I was in a full-blown depression. I stopped eating. I slept 23 hours a day. And, like, I went to work, like, right after everything happened. Because I just couldn't stay in the house. Because I went from newlywed and new mom to being completely alone in the house. With just baby stuff everywhere. And, like, I still, you know, had formula in the refrigerator that we had just made up. And it was just like, oh, my God. Because when everything happened... that following week, we were finally allowed to have the funeral. And then that following Sunday, my husband and I had tickets to Trans-Siberian Orchestra. It was going to be our date night. And it was our first anniversary of being married. And I was all by myself. And so, you know, we started talking and it was just like, well, Brent's never been and I've never been. And I still want to go and try to get myself out of the house. So we ended up going together. And it was a great time, but it was just kind of awkward because Brent and my husband look identical.
Do they really?
Seriously.
They are identical.
Crazy. Oh, wow.
And see, like, we found out and because he's my family, at the wedding, it was just like, my cousin came out and was like, well, how do you know Brent? And I was like, well, they've been best friends since they were in diapers. And Brent's, how do you know Jessica? And I was like, that's my cousin. He's, well, that's my half sister. And I'm like, really? Like, I can't go anywhere without being related to somebody.
Yeah, well, that's a tough place to be in.
But yeah, and just, so we went and it was a great show. And then like they have a half show. And mind you, the whole time, the funeral director is sitting directly behind me.
Goodness.
I don't want to say his name, but we had worked with him the month before because he took care of my grandpa's funeral. So he knew me. As soon as I saw him, we locked eyes. I was like, oh, great. Like, oh my God.
It's such a small world.
Right. So middle of the show and stuff. And it was about this child being born. The mother passed. The child had difficulties in the beginning with breathing and brain damage. And it was a lot similar to my son, you know, what he went through. So I'm like silently sobbing and Brent's just kind of patting me on the back like,
the awkward little pat. It's
so
fine.
Sorry.
I don't know what to do.
Okay. And I'm just like, I'm fine. I'm good. And so, you know, going through that and I was talking about that and counseling and stuff. And my therapist is like, I was at that show. I know what you're talking about. And I'm like, are you kidding me? And she's like, yeah, we were on the other side of the stadium. So it was nice to have someone, you know, understand what I was going through and just kind of like, okay.
So you're going through all that. You go to the show and you're starting the court dates. How long after you got home and then you were able to finally talk to your husband? And how long were you home before you were able to finally talk to him?
I want to say it was like a week, a couple weeks. I really don't know.
And they would like wouldn't allow you to go in and see him or anything.
No. So he kind of because he called at the funeral. Because I remember we were at the funeral. It was at the end of the funeral, and it was huge because we had planned, you know, the funeral and everything. And he's like, "Okay, well, we'll close some doors." I'm like, "No, you need to open this whole place up because it's just like everybody's gonna be here." And at the end of the funeral, my husband had called me. And I just took off running for the back room. And I think everybody thought like, oh my gosh, she's snapping. Like, oh no, she's so upset. And I'm like, no, he's just on the phone. I got to go talk to him really fast. But it was just right after that. And he finally could kind of get quick calls and stuff in there. They do like a Skype over there. So you can go in and Skype him when he's there.
So they do in-person visitation. They do like that Skyping type visit. Okay.
But then we didn't really see him until we started going to courts. And that was for 2-3 years? That we were going to court every single month. 2 to 3
years you guys were going in and out of the court for...
I was in the court more time than my husband was. And I've been cleared of everything. Wasn't me. I was there more times because the prosecution was upset that I was siding with my husband. Because I've sided with my husband since day one.
Right.
That this was an accident. And so they pulled me in there for updated subpoenas. And every time I would go in, they're like, well, you're not on the docket. We don't know why you're here. And so I'd have to get pulled up from the court and get an attorney to stand in. I got sick of it. So I just started showing up at their office and be like, hey, I'm here for my updated papers. Thanks. And they didn't even know what it was, like, why are you here? And I would always sit front row center. And like, I know you know that I'm going to be here. I never miss a date. So why are you doing this? But my attorney said it was a weak attempt of legal intimidation.
To what would be the purpose of it, I guess? That
they were upset that I wasn't siding with the prosecution. That this horrible man did this horrible thing to your child, and how could you side with him?
Well, that's not their job to worry about that. Right. Their job is to prosecute. The defense's job is to defend.
Right.
Your job is to do what you feel is right for you.
Right.
It doesn't matter what they think.
Yeah. So it was a lot of vacation days, paid vacation days, to watch all that court case stuff.
And I share what you want, share what you don't want. I mean, I know you probably don't want to get too specific, but after all these 3 years, and were you able to kind of still continue to visit with your husband during this process as you guys were going to court? Okay. Yep. And what did they end up, I guess, where did it land?
So we talked about it for the longest time and with his attorneys, because it was always, we have to switch attorneys. Things got like, I can't do this because of this, and I've worked with this guy. So we eventually decided that he was just going to plead out, because if he took it to trial, which anybody, they'd just be like, nope, he's guilty. Just automatically, it's a child involved, guilty. He was facing like 120 years.
Holy cow.
So when he pled out, he got 38 years. So he's in prison for 38 years right now. He will if he stays on and nothing happens, he will be released in 2050.
Man, that's a long time.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And like there's so much stuff in the courts now, not just specifically with him, but just prison reform in general.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
But they go through courts and everything's perfect on both sides, and then it gets to a time limit. It's like, well, it's the end of the year. We've got to start all over again. And prison stuff, it's just nobody really like, no, we don't care about that. They chose to be where they're at, and, you know, their funding and stuff is just not there.
I listened to a podcast the other day, and they had a couple guys on there, and it's called Project Innocence.
Mm-hmm.
And they were talking about that, and they were saying that, you know, a lot of times trying to get people that are innocent out takes years and years just because of the way the system is set up.
Oh, yeah.
You know, and in some cases, I mean, it was blatantly obvious the person did commit the crime.
Mm-hmm.
They found out that there was manipulation by the police, and they, you know, lied about evidence and all this stuff. And the DNA, you know, proved them innocent. And it still took years and years and years. So, yeah, I mean, it's crazy. I mean, once you're in the system, it's nearly impossible to beat it because it's just so convoluted and complicated.
It's so like, because I always like tell them and stuff, and with everybody, and it's not me trying to knock them or anything, but there is no corrections in the Department of Corrections.
No,
it's so hodgepodge, and the rules and, you know, the laws and everything is just so kind of all over the place. And there's really great people in there that work there, you know, that are really trying, but it's just like there's just so much. They don't even know where to begin.
I was a guard for 7 years at Pontiac, and I can tell you, your job there was just to try to get through the day and go home.
With whatever resources you've got.
Yeah, because that's all you got. I mean, it's not about reform, because in prison there isn't a lot of reform going on. No. In some cases, there are people choose to help themselves, right? And they take advantage of counseling or whatever they've got, or you know. But the officer's job, or the, you know, the people that work there that are just there as guards, reform is not your responsibility, right? That's not what you're trained to do. And so, to your point, and I think in Illinois, we have like the highest number of people in prison.
Oh, yeah.
It's insane.
It's
in the United States as a whole. So, how did you, when you finally, and you guys talked it through, and he said, you know, I'm going to plead out. They gave you the offer. He said, yep, I'm going to do that. Where was your head at that point? What did you think of that?
I was ready to go with him. It was just like, okay, let's do this. Let's, you know, because at that point it was just like, I just want this to end. I'm so tired of, you know, everything. And it was just like I've tried to talk to like people about it and stuff. And it's just like, it's not like I'm in denial and it's like, oh no, he could never do this. Because child abuse, it can happen from another child doing it to someone 100+ years old. Right. Like it can happen. It takes a second. Even if it's unintentional, it just happens. And it's just like what he did, because my husband was drinking and he was smoking that night and he was bouncing my son, which none of those things he should have been doing. But that's what's caused my son's death. And I recognize that and I understand that. And we've dealt with it. And, you know, when he finally comes home, we'll be able to finally grieve that way, because we were never allowed to grieve together. And it's just like, I'm not being blinded by it like that. My husband can be a butt sometimes. He's a White Sox fan. It's, you know.
White Sox fans are butts, right? That's funny.
But it's just like, I love my husband, and I know in my gut, in my heart, in my mind that he is telling me the truth. And that's just the kind of man he is. He is honest to a fault. And it's just like, I don't care if I'm the only person beside you right now. I will stand up with you. I went against the entire state of Illinois and testified on his behalf. And I'm just like, I'm here. And I've told him in the courts, I forgive you. I love you and stuff.
So, and to your point, I mean, he said, you know, I wasn't intentionally doing anything, right? And so, and I think that's a good point you brought up a little bit ago when you were talking about if we would have went to trial. It sounds like with all of the different news media coverage and the Facebook posts and everything, I mean...
It would have been bad.
It would have been really hard to pick a juror.
Well, that's kind of where I'm going. It's like, where would you find 12 impartial people? And especially in the case of the death of a child. Right. With what the charges are. I mean, I think you're right when you say, you know, automatically you're guilty. Especially if they look at you, you're a big guy, if you got tattoos, you got a big beard or whatever.
Which he does.
He does. Yeah. But and just that appearance alone, a lot of people look at you and they'll be like, you know that guy's done. So if he wasn't this, he's done something. You know, so it's come on.
That's usually the first impression people get from him, and it's just this man is over here helping little ladies with their groceries and holding doors open, and babies are drawn to his beard, and just he's just that big fluffy guy, and it's oh, your husband's so tough looking. I'm he ain't nothing. I mean, he is, but
yeah, but the woman always runs the husband. Let's not kid ourselves. I have no doubt about that. I'm sure Brandy runs. Yeah, I know, because us big guys. I mean, we're big burly fools. But when Mama's mad, we're I'm sorry. I'm gonna go sit down now. I'm gonna go to the garage and leave you alone when you're. Let me know what I need to buy you.
Right.
That's how Pam. She's all right, dude. I'm gonna knock you out. I'm sorry. Don't hurt me. Man, that's a lot. Mm-hmm. And so did you even feel like once the sentence came in and you guys, or not the sentence, when he pleaded out, and did you feel any closure from that at all?
A little bit. I was just so I was so tired. I'm so happy all this court stuff's done. And it was just that constant, is someone going to come to the house, and is my attorney going to call again? And are we going to have to go to a meeting or, whatever? And it was just everything's finally done and we can just kind of start our lives over. Be okay, let's get into prison life. Because I kind of grew up with that my whole life anyway, with family members and friends being in and out of jail and prison. So I'm kind of comfortable with that already. But it was just all right, we beat this thing to the ground. I'm done with it. Let's move on.
Is he close enough that you can go visit fairly often?
Now he is. Yes.
Okay.
He was in Southern Illinois at Menard.
Oh, yeah. Oh, man. That's way down there.
4.5-hour drives. And most of the time we'd get turned around because they go on lockdown because it's Menard. It's a max.
It's a maximum security.
So it's just half the time it was, do we drive down there and get turned away? Do we go to the hotel or do we just drive straight back home? What are we going to do? Now he's in Galesburg, so it's just hey.
Oh, that's not a bad little camp there.
No, no.
And that's
so nice.
40-minute drive, so that's not too bad.
But with COVID, I haven't seen him in person since March. We Skype twice a week, and he calls every single day.
Okay, every time I talk to him, hey, what are you doing?
I'm on the phone with Zach.
I'm calling my lawyer. Okay.
Right. But it's so much nicer. And the thing is, he can be moved at any time. Mm-hmm. And with COVID, they kind of, held everybody down because they don't want any, passing around or anything. And it's just please stay here for a couple more years. It's going to be so much easier this way.
Yeah, I don't remember the reason behind it, but I think they move people around to keep them from getting too comfortable in the prison or stuff like that. And I don't.
Friends.
Yeah, I don't remember, I used to remember the limit or the time limit, but I'll tell you, when I was in Pontiac, there had been guys that had been in Pontiac, at the prison for 10 or 12 years. I mean, it was a long time.
Oh, yeah.
So I think it's just this weird random, hey, we're just going to move these guys this time. And I don't know if there was really a good methodology to why you're moving so many people.
I mean, sometimes, there is, but no. And I mean, he's such a great guy anyway. And he works, as a worker, and he's always hard. He's always something I've worked so hard today. But it's just, I think he's very comfortable. He can be with anybody. I mean, he's just friendly with everybody. That's just who he is. He just can't help it. He's a big dog. It's just
And so the process going forward, is there any opportunity for appeal, or is there anything else, or is this, it's done and you just got to get through this next, however many years?
I don't know if there's a time limit or not, but if he would go back, he would be facing up to 100 plus years. We go back to the 120. So I don't know if we're kind of nervous about the possibility of that happening. And it's just okay, well, we've got what we got. Let's just move on with it and just be done.
Be done with it.
Right.
And let's
just that's going to be court all over again.
And probably years of it.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, because especially now with COVID and everything else going on, there's nothing going to happen quickly.
Right.
So, wow, that's a heck of a story.
Yeah.
Dang. And you seem, you're staying real positive, and that's not an easy thing to do.
My mom yells at me all the time. She's, how can you be so calm all the time with everything? That's just how I am. And
she was like that at the hospital too when I went up. Well, even when she called me on the phone to tell me what happened, I'm sitting here bawling, I'm pregnant, and she's like, this is what happened. Mm-hmm. You really need to come up here if you want to see him, if you want to say your goodbyes. And she was just calm the whole time. Because
it's just, I don't know, I'm just going to mom mode. And it's just you know what? It's out of my control, and God has it. And it's just kind of he's either going to heal him and everything's going to be great, or he's going to heal him and everything's going to be great, and he's going to go home. And I know where he's at, and I know he's being taken care of by crazy family up in heaven. And
Yeah.
Grandpa's teaching him a lot of bad stuff, but, he's okay, and I'm going to see him again one day. And, like, with counseling, my counselor was religious. She's Christian, and I am, too. I'm a Baptist. And she's recommended a book, and because I'm a big reader. It was Heaven is for Real, and I read it, and I'm like, oh, that's a really great book. It's I already know a lot of that stuff, and the movie is amazing. But it didn't really hit me. I mean, it did. It's great, but it just didn't feel real for me. Until I found the book The Shack, and then I saw the movie.
We went and seen that movie, Pam and I did.
That was the first time I ever felt something was so bluntly honest about dealing with it and the feelings with it and that wrestling with God and just like, how dare you? And then coming full circle, and it's just like, you see the beauty in all that pain and everything.
Mm-hmm.
And it's just like, oh.
Yeah, I remember I made peace very early on when Nick passed that I wasn't going to know the ultimate reason why. Mm-hmm. I mean, I knew the medical reason why, but right. That, the reason behind why God did this, I wasn't going to know it, and I wasn't going to spend a lot of time trying to figure it out. Mm-hmm. And I just made peace with that because I'm not going to know until it's my time. Mm-hmm. And so I'm like, well, I just don't feel like putting any energy in that makes any sense. Because a lot of people do that. Mm-hmm. I've seen parents that when they lose a child, or not even just a child, a loved one that's very close to them, a spouse or a brother or whatever the case may be, man, they want to know the reason why. There's got to be a reason why, and I just need to know it. Well, you're not going to know it. Right. You just have to have faith that there's a reason, and it's a good reason, and that's just until it's time for you to know. That's just how it is, you know, and you have to accept. And I almost wonder sometimes in a way and I'm rambling a little bit, but if that's just it's how they can't accept what's actually happened. Right. So that's how they keep themselves from accepting what's happened. Mm-hmm. And until I know why, I can't accept this. But you're just hurting yourself, I think.
Mm-hmm. Oh, yeah. Because I beat myself up and just the what ifs and just being so angry. And I found with counseling, it was the go-tos. My go-to was going to Forest Park Nature Center and angrily hiking by myself. And just having that kind of meditation with God and just praying, going out there being livid and so mad and angry. And then like walking the loop and then like in the middle of it, just breaking down and crying and just kind of feeling like a kid and a parent. Like I don't understand what's going on. And it's just like, I know, it's okay. You're not supposed to know what's my reasoning, but I've got you and it's going to be okay. And then just coming out feeling so just relieved and that weight coming off.
Are you still living in the same area?
I live in the same house where everything happened.
And she has a sign in her front yard that says Crazy Cat Lady.
Mm-hmm. But I'm not the crazy cat lady. I'm the crazy plant lady. Well, my husband calls me Poison Ivy.
It's changed.
Yeah. Are people treating you any differently? I mean, is it?
No. That was one of my biggest fears. It was just because everybody sees me differently now. I mean, not now because we're comfortable and I can talk about it and they know how I feel. And back then I didn't really have a voice and it was just kind of like, okay, just make everybody happy. And now it's just like, I don't care if you agree with me or not. That's your feelings and your beliefs and that's great. Okay. Yeah. And now it's like, well, I can speak up too and I'm going to live my life. Because when it first happened, I had people, either run away and cry and not, just completely leave me and I haven't talked to them since. Or I've had somebody come up to me and, well, you're so young and beautiful and you're going to divorce and you're going to remarry and you're going to have more kids to replace your son. Within the first week of it happening, I hadn't even buried my son yet. Well, not buried because we cremated him, but at his funeral.
Yeah. I think it's funny in a way when people say, well, you'll have more kids and you replace the one you want. Mm-hmm. So if I have more children, just so you understand, I love them, but they won't replace the one that I lost because I loved them. And every child is different and unique. Mm-hmm. So I'm still going to feel that loss of that child. Right. There's no replacing that. And I always find that kind of funny in a way when people think that that's the case. It's like, well, you don't replace them. You can't. It's not like a book you buy off the shelf in the store, It's like, well, I broke the cover, I'll just go buy it. That's not how that works. Right. I even though I do think that a lot of times that advice is coming from a place of goodness and they're just trying to be helpful.
Right. But I think really knows what to say.
Well, no, there's no, honestly, there's no rules. Nobody tells you how you're supposed to feel and deal with this either. I mean, you limp through it the best you can. And, and at some point when you come out of the other side through a lot of counseling and support of your family and friends, and hopefully, you realize there's still a life out there that's worth living, and you can still allow yourself to have good moments and laugh and giggle and be silly, and
right.
that's all still okay, and that's the hard part. I think for me for a while was just realizing, and I, we have other children, and now I've got a shit ton of grandkids. So it's like, I have to realize, it's still okay to live and be and have good times and make more memories. You have to.
And, going through the process and stuff, I've actually found a local group here in Peoria. It's called Peoria Share, Walk to Remember. And we go every year. And it's just this group of women and families who come together who've all lost children in any way. And we just remember them. Because for me, when people ask, it's like, well, I still have a son. I have a son. Yeah, he's 8 years old. And, but he's gone. He's not with us anymore. And for them, it's just being together to just be and to grieve. And like, I remember my first year going there and just making the comment of like, wow, there's not a lot of people here. I thought my mom was going to pop me in the mouth, because she's like, you realize all these women have lost children. And it's not just the moms, it's the families and the friends and the church family and, the community. And it's just a really nice day to just come together and just celebrate that life. Even if it was just for a moment or whatever, or for weeks like we had our son.
Right.
It's just really nice to have that community and just, the feelings that I was feeling, and then talking with them about it. And it's like, wow, you feel exactly the same way as I do. So it was nice. Because like with the donation and everything, I was talking to them about it, and I'm like, I'm starting to feel really jealous, and I feel weird about that, because I feel jealous towards the recipient. Like, no, it should be in my son and it should still be working. And it's like, that's not how it works. And it's like, you can't do anything about it. And like, now I'm happy and I'm so grateful for them. And like, they're my family now.
So I was going to, I'm glad you brought that up, because I was going to ask you that question. Did you get a letter from the Gift of Hope? And,
yes.
And can you kind of share, if you want to, share with us who he helped and stuff?
So I can't remember. I want to say it was a couple months later. And right off the bat, because they ask you, would you like contact with the person, all that? And I'm just like, I'll fly down there right now and be there for the surgery when he wakes up. Like, that's my family now. But we did get a letter, and it was very sweet. And it said that a 54-year-old man from somewhere in southern United States received both his kidneys, and that they worked right away, and everything was great, and it was healthy, and they retrieved his heart. The whole heart couldn't be used for transplant, but they used the heart valves because for children, for the babies, because it's really hard to find kidneys and organs for children that young. But we didn't receive any letters yet for that. But that was all that was able to be donated, because the rest with the autopsy and everything like that.
Mm-hmm. Sure.
But I remember getting that letter I read it in the garage, and I just broke down crying, because I was so proud and so happy, and just like, oh my gosh, like my son's life affected somebody else's life like that. And it's just like my 6-week-old son, or 6-week-old son saved a 54-year-old man's life.
Yeah, isn't that crazy? That's crazy. And the kidney is the number one organ that is needed.
And see, my aunt, I won't name names because everybody knows her, but she's had to deal with this her whole life and needing a kidney transplant. And, when we decided to make that choice, they were so grateful that we would. And she recently, in the last couple of years, got her kidney transplant.
Oh,
so
fantastic.
It's just like, yes. And she's doing great now and everything. And just being in that process on both sides. And I've seen like this documentary on PBS. I think it's called Transplanting Hope. And it shows the whole process on both sides and how difficult it was. And for us, it was just when we got that news, because when she first got the call, it was like, yeah, okay, we've gotten this call before. And they're like, no, you need to get up here now. We knew in that instant, like, we need to stop and just take a second to pray over that family, because someone's worst day of their life is our best right now. We need to recognize that. And it's just, thank you so much for making that choice. And it's just, for a lot of people, I always tell them, like, you need to make that choice now before you get in that situation, because that's one of the last things you want to think about.
Yeah, completely. I mean, obviously for us, after we lose Nick, we hadn't really thought a lot about it, to be honest with you. But then now every one of us is one registered to be an organ donor, because, we want to be able to help people, and Nick helped people. So it's a really good thing. And I'm glad you guys did that. Thank you for doing that, especially, and to your good point, it is your worst day of your life, but you're still thoughtful enough thinking, if I can help, out of my worst day, if there's something good that I can come out of this, I can help somebody else, then why wouldn't I, Why wouldn't I be compassionate to the needs of others? So that's
because I just kept putting myself in, like, what if I was that mom and it was like my child needed it and it was like somebody could do something about it. I would want them to do that. So I was just like, I'm saving someone else's baby. Like, that's just my mindset of it.
That's
like,
kind of what I thought too. Well, I'm losing mine, but if I can save somebody else's, I'm going to do that,
Right.
And so that's fantastic.
Yeah.
So it sounds like you've learned to live your life and you got a pretty good positive attitude about it. And this is who you are and this is what it is. And you're going to live with it and you're going to make the best of it.
Right.
And that's fantastic.
Yeah.
I can't thank you enough for sharing your story. That was an incredible story. Wow, you went through a lot.
Yeah.
And here you are still smiling and giggling, right?
Giggling and laughing, yeah.
Yeah, having a great time.
Yeah.
So, I do appreciate you guys coming in today. Thank you so much.
Thanks.
I'm going to go ahead and end it here if that's okay with you guys. I think this is a good place. We've talked a lot of stuff. Man, that was a crazy story.
I barely had to talk. It was perfect.
Yeah, worked out great for you, didn't it, Brandy?
It was great.
So, again, thank you very much. So, listen, everybody, I appreciate you listening in. If you're listening, you like what you hear, please hit like. I'm on all kinds of different platforms. I'm on Apple Podcasts, Stitcher, Spotify. So whatever platform you're using, please leave some comments. I want to hear the feedback. If there's other things you want me to talk to people about, I'd be more than happy to listen. Also, remember, if you're not an organ donor, please go out and register. There's several different ways to do it. You can go to giftofhope.org. You can go on that website there, and they'll walk you through the registration process. You can go to your Illinois driver's license facility, and you can register there too and become an organ donor that way as well. So again, thank you guys for coming on. I appreciate it.
Thanks for having us.
My pleasure. And until next time, everybody, peace.